Hey guys, Aaron Dorr here with the Indiana Firearms Coalition. I think every gun owner in America knows that we have defanged part of Biden's war against our gun rights by kicking Nancy Pelosi the heck out of the Speaker's office and taking back the House in Washington, D.C. That's the good news. The bad news, though, is it's not going to stop Biden from attacking our gun rights with more and more executive orders. But the Second Amendment Preservation Act would do exactly that. Recently, I interviewed Representative Lorissa Sweet, who is the lead sponsor of SAPA in this 2023 legislative session. Guys, you're going to love this bill. You're going to love what it does. Take a moment, watch the video, get involved in our fight using the links at the end of it. And guys, let's get this done. Hey guys, Aaron Dorr here with the Indiana Firearms Coalition, joined today with new State Representative Lorissa Sweet, about to start her first term in the legislature. And Lorissa is carrying the Second Amendment Preservation Act bill we've talked to you about so much in this 2023 legislative session. I think we're so happy to have you on today, Lorissa, to talk to you about your bill and what it does. I think the big question that Hoosiers and everybody has in the gun rights space right now is, what do we do about Joe Biden's executive orders? You know, the gun voters shut down his direct avenue of attack by taking control of the House, right? So he can't, hopefully, pass any gun control in the House in the next 2 years. But that's not going to stop him from signing more executive orders attacking gun owners through these tyrannical edicts that never received a vote in Congress. Your bill is designed to prevent that. Tell us how SAPA works.
Well, thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, so what SAPA basically does is it takes the power away from the federal government by saying Indiana is going to uphold Indiana laws. Indiana is going to uphold our Constitution, and Indiana is going to protect gun rights by not allowing any of our resources as the state of Indiana to go towards these tyrannical gun laws.
So I love that. Just to be honest, just off the bat, we love this. The idea that, I mean, I think it's easy for Joe Biden and the tyrants in D.C. to forget, but we've got 50 sovereign states. And you, as a state representative, work for the sovereign state of Indiana. And Indiana protects gun rights in your own constitution. And if we wanted to be a vassal of the all-powerful federal government, we may as well dissolve the 50 states, dissolve the 50 legislatures that we have, and just submit to whatever stuff comes out of Joe Biden's brain. You're saying that this is our state, and we're going to enforce our own gun laws, and we're not going to let Joe Biden have the free use of our manpower. Did I hear you correctly on that?
Absolutely. So it's just saying that our officers here in the state of Indiana do not have to put forth their resources towards enforcing federal gun laws that are not our laws here in the state of Indiana, and that our state sovereignty overrides what the federal government is trying to do, that we don't see as constitutional.
Well, I think what's so cool about this is that you're not taking a stand. I'm going to ask you about the supremacy clause here in a minute, but you're not taking a stand on what's right or what's wrong when it comes to Joe Biden. You're simply saying that, hey, you know, this is our state. And the reason why people live in Indiana versus California, or live in another red state versus a blue state, is they want to live under a certain way of life and a certain set of laws that protects these rights. And you're simply saying that this is my state. I'm elected to fight for my constituents in my state. And if you want to do these things, have your own federal resources do it. I love the idea of this.
Absolutely. We shouldn't have to pay the bill for the federal government.
Yeah, exactly. I think what's so powerful about this is just simply by not engaging, by not giving him the free use of Indiana troopers, deputies, city cops, that his whole agenda will just collapse under its own weight, because there's not going to be the manpower that they need to enforce it without having the free use of our cops. I think the parallels that you've said on the phone with me before with this bill and what we saw the left do to our side when our side had control of the White House, those parallels can't be forgotten. You know, the blue cities and blue states did not want to help evict illegal aliens who in many cases had criminal warrants out for them for felony crimes. They didn't want to enforce laws that deal with narcotics either direction. And the point is not where you stand on those issues. The point, the states had the right when there was a red, when Team R controlled the White House to not help. And you're simply saying the same thing applies now that the goose is on the other foot.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we shouldn't, state sovereignty is becoming a huge deal across the board, not just with guns, but this is
Yes.
something that we can tackle this year. And I think it's a great place to start. And I know there's been wins in other states on state sovereignty and supremacy clause, and it's a great way to open doors for other legislation as well.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And you mentioned the supremacy clause. What we hear a lot from either the radical left or some of the folks that are squishy on the right is the idea that, well, supremacy clause trumps state rights. And their idea is that the federal constitution supersedes the state constitution, that federal law supersedes state law. And I think the beauty of what your bill does is it doesn't involve that issue at all. You're not saying, if I'm correct in this, you're not telling the federal government what they can or cannot do in Indiana. You're simply saying that when it comes to firearms, ammunition, and accessories, we're not going to let Hoosier cops help you do it. Am I getting that correct?
Yeah, if they want to enforce it, they enforce it, and they're not going to use our resources to do it.
So you're not even touching the idea of supremacy clause. And I think that was one of the problems in the gun rights community going back in the old days, now 2009, 2010, when Obama was first in the White House, is there was this big push for nullification. We're going to nullify federal gun control in our state. And the problem with that, I was around back in those days, the problem with that, it set up that inherent conflict where you were basically challenging the federal government's authority. And I think what we've seen now with the newer iterations of this, with SAPA law in particular, is it's a better approach. You're not challenging what Joe Biden can or can't do. You're simply saying, if you want to do it, have your own manpower enforce it, not be counting on our tax dollars and our law enforcement community to help you do it. So just to be very clear to folks who are watching, SAPA, as you have written it here for Indiana, simply says that when it comes to firearms, ammunition, and accessories, Indiana cops enforce Indiana gun laws, and that's it.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Well, and it's important that we have these differences because Indiana's come a long ways in the fight for gun rights. Just last year, we finally finished the fight and passed constitutional carry law. Again, if people want to live in a state that embraces tyranny, that embraces gun control, that wants to disarm the entire population, they're free to move to those states. The reason why people live in places like Indiana is that we reject that kind of tyranny here. I think it's great to see a bill that typifies that in the code. It's well done.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. It's about personal freedoms, and this is one of the greatest of them. If without this, we can't uphold any of the other ones. So if we don't protect our Second Amendment, we won't have anything else to protect because we'll lose
Absolutely. Now, I want to ask you some questions and some of the objections that we hear on the bill, separate from the supremacy clause issue. And the first one that we hear, we know that you're going to be asked about this session, isn't SAPA anti-cop? Because I guess I kind of forgot one of the main tenets of your bill, and that is I'm going to have to back up here, the teeth. Because the reality is that and more and more, the bigger these blue cities are, even if they're in a Republican-controlled state, they're simply just saying, you know what, we're going to do whatever we think is best, and you guys can just go pound sand, even though it's the people through the legislature that appropriates their budget in the first place. And so what you've done with SAPA, and it is a wise call, is you have to acknowledge that some of these cities may try to violate SAPA. And if we say that they have to enforce state law when it comes to guns, and there's no way to force them to do that, their command staff, not the frontline guys, but the command staff who are oftentimes appointed by mayors, they're more a politician than anything else. They may just choose to disobey it. And what you've done with SAPA is you've given a private cause of action that allows people to sue their departments in civil court. Am I correct on those details?
Right. So it puts the power back in the people's hands. So when they feel like they have been violated because their state law enforcement is coming in and upholding a federal law that is not an Indiana law, and we see it as not constitutional, then they have the power to take them to civil court and sue for damages. And so then it puts the blame squarely on those that it deserves to be on. And then it takes the pressure off of law enforcement's back to enforce things that they don't believe in, you know? So
Right.
if they're being told from their higher ups that they need to, you know, enforce these federal gun laws and they say, no, I don't think that we should do this because it's unconstitutional. It takes the pressure off of them because they have the law that backs them saying, I don't have to do this. And it puts the consequences on those that are forcing them to do it.
Well, I think the whole idea of this civil penalty enforcement mechanism is just such a powerful thing these days. Over the last couple of years, whether it was the various COVID issues or all the various issues of the last couple of years, we've seen an explosion of local jurisdictions from school boards all the way to big cities and everywhere between, simply telling their state that we're not going to comply, that we're not going to do what you tell us to do. And I think having the old way, the Firearms Freedom Act, days of 2009, 2010, it required the attorney general and it required the governor to see a situation and decide that we're going to intervene on behalf of gun owners in our state against an out of control federal government. I think the beauty of your enforcement mechanism here is that it doesn't require anybody else to defend us. It doesn't require the attorney general to engage. It doesn't require the governor to engage. It simply says that the individual gun owner whose rights are impacted can take that agency, not the individual cop, but the agencies, into court. And I think that's a powerful tool that we have to use more and more in an era when so many jurisdictions are simply choosing to willfully ignore the state law and just figure that we'll deal with it later on in court. You're going to bypass all of that with this.
Absolutely. I feel like it's a win-win.
So we've addressed the issue of it being anti-cop or not, but I want to ask you also, when it comes to getting help from the feds. So we're saying that Hoosier cops will enforce Hoosier laws when it comes to firearms, ammo, and accessories, not help the feds. Does your bill block the feds from giving help to the states? For example, if the sheriff's department is investigating an armed robbery and they have shell casings, can they get those shell casings analyzed or fingerprints from them analyzed by the feds, even if SAPA is the law here in Indiana?
Absolutely. It doesn't cut those ties. So they're still able to use the federal government for those things that they need to. And they can also assist the federal government if the law that has been broken also is an Indiana state law having to do with firearms. So it's not saying that we're just cutting them off altogether. It's just saying that we are not going to enforce federal laws that are not Indiana laws as well.
You raise a good point. I forgot to ask you about that, but you mentioned that to me in the phone earlier, which is that, like you said, SAPA allows the state authorities to still assist the feds in certain cases, even if a firearm may be involved, if an underlying Indiana law was also being broken. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you've got a guy with a straight truck full of fentanyl, traveling across Indiana, heading to Chicago or whatever, and there happens to be a firearm in the vehicle. Well, because transporting a truckload of fentanyl is a crime in Indiana, what you're saying is that local authorities could help the feds enforce that law, even though a firearm happens to be involved. Is that an example of what you're talking about?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not completely severing that relationship.
Just we're not going to help them, but they can certainly help us. And I think that's an important point there. That's what we want. We want their help, but we're not trying to become a vassal of the DOJ or of the federal government. That's going back to the state sovereignty issue. So you mentioned that other states already have this law on the books. I know that Missouri, you said, has done some of this. Is this legislation pretty much directly mirroring what Missouri has done in 2021?
It is. It is pretty much the exact same thing that we're trying to get done here in Indiana. We thought it was good there, so why not just mirror it and do it here as well?
Sure. I know what's really important to people always is, well, how have the courts interacted with this? And what's cool, I think, about the Missouri situation, as you told me, was that they have already survived 2 circuit court challenges, and they've survived a DOJ challenge at the state Supreme Court level. And it's an ongoing matter of litigation in Missouri. But The DOJ has tried 3 times already to get the law overturned, and the courts have, at least so far, upheld it, because the beauty of this is its simplicity. Like, as we said at the beginning, we're not limiting what the feds can do in Indiana the way Missouri did not limit what the feds can do in Missouri. They're simply saying, if you want to do it, you do it. And you don't be trying to make us do it here.
Exactly.
It's just it's great to see other states that have done this. I know, having worked in gun politics for a long time, that for your caucus, one of the big questions that always comes up is, who else has done this? And now you can say, well, yeah, Missouri has done this, and it's time that Hoosiers do it too. I think that for a lot of gun owners and our members across the state, there is a real sense of relief when we finally got constitutional carry law passed last year. But at the same time, there's also a lot of frustration that it took a long time, and it felt like we were held back as dozens of states all around us passed this same thing. I know for a lot of our members, well, the temptation from the lawmakers' perspective may be that we dealt with the gun issue for a while. We're hungry for more. We want more freedoms protected very quickly in light of this president in the White House.
Absolutely. This is the best time to do it. When the pressure is on from the federal government, it's the time to act, because if we wait, it may be too late. So we need to get ahead of this before some crazy executive order is signed and we don't have the means to stop it.
Exactly. I love the fact that, so oftentimes as conservatives, the courts have been our enemies, just to be honest, on all kinds of issues since I was first able to remember. Whatever your issues are, we've seemed to always had them as our enemy. And we've had a sea change. Let's just be honest. I mean, in the last couple of years, with some of the nominees that we saw Trump put on the Supreme Court and all of the different federal court vacancies that were there when he came into the White House, love Trump, hate Trump. That's not the point. The point, though, is that we have a really friendly court right now on the issue of the Second Amendment. We had a massive two-way victory last year, the Bruin decision. And so I think what's nice is you're pushing SAPA in an era when, if this goes to SCOTUS, that we have a strong chance of winning this. And I think that's just a great time to be doing this in general, but especially when, as we were discussing this offline, there's just so much precedent from the Supreme Court that already backs this up. I've got a list here right now. I'm just going to read some of these off to you, but these are 5 cases, and they're going to go back from 2018 all the way back to 1842. So it's a long time span and these are all cases. 1 involves guns, but 4 don't. But they're all cases where the feds were telling the states, you will do this. For example, the Fugitive Slave Act of 1842. The feds told the states, you will return captured runaway slaves. And Pennsylvania said, heck, we will. We're not going to do that. And when the feds challenged the states, the SCOTUS said, no, the states have the right to do what's in their own best interest. You've got that case. You have the 1997 Brady Bill case, Prinz versus United States. You've got the New York State case in 1997 that dealt with nuclear waste. The feds told the states, you will accept nuclear waste and bury them in your state. And they said, no, we're not. And they went to court, and the court said, you can't force the states to do this. You get the Obamacare case, 2012, and then sports betting, NCAA versus Murphy in 2018. Again, the states wanted to legalize something. The feds said you can't do it. It's a reverse of what SAPA does, but it's a states' rights issue. The Supreme Court said, again, the states have the right to do what's in the best interest of their own constituents. So for all the legal scholars and the armchair pundits out there, we don't believe, I think you and I, Lorissa, that our rights don't come from the judges, but certainly anybody that tries to claim that the Supreme Court or the courts in general have not backstopped the issue of state sovereignty, they're either ignorant or they're simply lying about these 5 cases.
Absolutely. And again, without state sovereignty, what's the point of having states?
Yeah.
If I choose to live in a red state because it's more conservative and it upholds my freedoms, that's my right to do. If I wanted to live in California where it's a blue state, I could move there. That's the great thing about having, they're moving more this way than we are moving that way. But yeah, without state sovereignty, we can't have that. We'll all look the same, and I'm not ready to go there.
No, no, I don't think America wants to go there, for heaven's sakes. I mean, that's what's keeping things, I think, as calm as they are, is that, yeah, if you want to be in a blue state, there's lots of vacancies. If you want to move to a red state, not as many vacancies, but you can still find a home and have
Yeah,
a quality of life that supersedes what I believe you're going to find in a blue state. I wanted to ask you one last question too. It's kind of more of a nuanced question, but we hear a lot again about how you're going to see this opposition from the law enforcement lobby, and you're an incoming state rep. Just explain to people for a moment, when we say the law enforcement lobby, that doesn't mean the deputy who goes to your church. That doesn't mean the trooper who coaches your kid's little league team. That doesn't mean the local cops that you see around your life day to day. We're talking about the lobbyists who represent them in the legislature. That's what we mean by lobby. Am I getting that correct?
absolutely. And they are not one and the same, because when you talk to local law enforcement, they strongly uphold the Second Amendment, and they do know that actually the Second Amendment makes their job easier. Living where I
Yeah.
live, if I have an emergency, if if I need an officer, it's going to take him a little while to get here. And so me having the power to protect my home and protect my family, um, most officers are game for that. The reason the lobby doesn't like it is they just see dollars, and so they see dollars as their main goal, and they don't see the protection of human life.
Yeah. Well, and we experienced that last year with constitutional carry. It seems like almost every department head in the state came out, not everyone, but it seemed that way at times, opposing this legislation. But every frontline cop that we spoke with was 100% in favor of it. And you mentioned the dollars, and this is kind of the point I was going to try to make on this or ask you about on this. And that is that when you have the lobby in the state capitol, they're mostly on behalf of the appointed political heads of these departments. One of the things they're trying to protect is this insidious program. It's referred to as the Federal Equitable Sharing Program. And I guess it's really important to kind of talk about this for a moment, because I don't think that many Hoosiers understand that when a joint task force is set up with the federal government, let's say, NDPD loans out, 10 cops to a joint federal task force, and they grab some troopers here and some deputies here. When they form those task forces to go do gun seizures, that 80% of the money that is confiscated from these task forces, that reverts back to the local jurisdictions who loaned out their officers. So there's a major money motivator here that's far separate from the issue of state sovereignty in the Second Amendment.
Absolutely. Money talks. And so right now that's what's talking for the lobby, is the fact that they don't want to lose those funds when they go in to do gun seizures and they find money, and that's going into their pocket, and that's keeping their jobs. So that's what they like about it. But I don't like that it's putting our officers in danger. It's not their officers, it's our
Yep.
state and our local officers that are going to enforce these laws. They're the ones that are putting their lives on the line, um, for things that are just not constitutional.
Exactly. And the money, I just want to, I think we'll put a
I
link
don't think
underneath the
money
video.
ever should override life.
No, or our freedoms, both of these things. I think we'll put a link beneath the video here, Lorissa, for those who are curious. But I have the dollar amount, and I think it might shock people to understand we're not talking about jurisdictions getting $100 here or $1,000 here. The Institute for Justice, a group that we have no connection with, they study these issues at the federal level, and they have a breakdown on every state in the country and how much money they receive from this federal equitable sharing program. And they tracked over the last 20 years, from the year 2000 to 2019, a 20-year time span there, 82,824,858 and some change that Indiana law
Mhm.
enforcement agencies have received as being a part of these joint task forces. So $82.8 million. That is what's on the line potentially. And so that, I think, is what people have to ask themselves when they hear their local department head criticize your SAPA bill. They have to ask themselves, I think, the obvious question: is this about their views on freedom, or is it about $82.8 million that they've received from these programs?
Absolutely. Yep. Is it about the money or is it about freedom? That's what it boils down to.
It's just dangerous stuff. I think that's what we see every day right now for the last 2 years from the White House, is this constant push to federalize everything. They want to federalize law enforcement. They want to federalize, county prosecutors. We had gun bills in 2022, which gave massive amounts of money to temporarily deputize county prosecutors as AUSAs to prosecute gun crimes, or to take county sheriff's deputies and temporarily make them an ATF agent to enforce federal gun laws. At every level of government, the way it seems, they're trying to buy the control or the use of our law enforcement community to enforce their agenda. If there was ever a time to stand up and say, this is our state, this is our freedom, these are our cops funded by our tax dollars who protect our rights, backed up in our state constitution and codified in our laws, boy, now is the time to do exactly that. So thank you so much for carrying this bill for Hoosiers. There's a lot going to be riding on this as we approach the session, which begins here very shortly. I know for all of our members, you can watch the video, the links below the video here, and take action and contact your lawmakers and ask them to co-sponsor Representative Sweet's bill. What else can folks do to be involved in this fight, Lorissa?
Well, if they would like to sign the petition to make sure that this happens, so that the State House knows that this is what Hoosiers want, you can go to libertydefense.us /2A and sign the petition. And if you want to keep updated on where this bill is going, you can find the information there. And I'll take all the support that I can get. And I know that Hoosiers are hungry for freedom, and especially when it comes to being able to defend their families.
Absolutely.
So,
I'm not sure what your ethics laws are, so I don't want to put you in a pinch, but can you give out your website, and can people go to your website to sign up for emails or to join, donate to your future campaign, I guess? If they can't do that right now, I don't want to put you in a hot spot, but can they get more information from your website?
Yeah, my website is Sweet, 4, Indiana. And as soon as session starts, I cannot take donations. So there is no donation link there.
Okay.
So
but they can sign up to get emails maybe and to learn more about this legislation and the rest of the bills that you're pushing. And I would encourage all of our members who are watching to go there and do that. When you carry a major gun bill like this, or any big issue bill like this, a lot of times you get as many arrows in the back as you do in the chest, and vice versa. And for you to carry this bill for us, we appreciate that very much. And so for all you guys and gals who are watching, follow what this woman is doing in the state capitol on your behalf. She's leading the fight. She needs your support. Thank you again for your time, Lorissa. We appreciate it very much, and we'll definitely do our part to rally the troops behind your bill here on the outside.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated.